Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging into the evolving world of modern Pilates, but we're doing it through this really unique lens.
Yeah, it's definitely different.
It really challenges a lot of assumptions, about fitness, well-being, how we even connect with our own bodies.
Absolutely. And our source for this deep dive, it's quite special. It's an exclusive interview with Gandour. Now, Gandour is this incredibly wise former champion racehorse.
A racehorse, okay, that is unique.
Exactly. Celebrated for speed, performance, the whole thing. But now he observes the modern Pilates movement from his stable, very serene apparently by the Mediterranean, offers these really insightful thoughts.
Wow. Okay, so our mission then for this deep dive is really to unpack Gandour's critique, this critique of current Pilates trends. We want to explore what it genuinely means to connect with your body beyond the marketing hype, beyond just performance.
And help you, the listener, sort of figure out what's real well-being versus maybe just a passing trend.
Okay, let's start there. Gandour, you mentioned, was a champion racehorse. He says something fascinating about moving from running to win to now breathing to understand. That's a big shift.
It's fundamental for him. It completely shapes how he sees things now.
So how does that shift, how does it inform his view on, say, modern practices like Solidcore?
Well, he looks at trends like Solidcore, these classes where people are pushed to, exhaustion, trembling on these big machines, often in dark rooms.
Right, intense.
Very intense. And he sees something familiar. He calls it the look of performance disguised as freedom. He recognizes that drive, that intensity from his own racing days.
And he makes a pretty stark comparison to those days, doesn't he? Being harnessed, bandaged, injected sometimes.
Yeah, running until his muscles screamed. But, and this is key, he says at the end of all that, there was just emptiness.
Emptiness. So when he says these modern classes, often sold as a return to oneself, or actually a flight forward, what's he getting at?
He's pointing out a kind of paradox, his racing life. All about external goals, pushing limits, but it left him feeling hollow. He sees something similar happening now.
Okay.
These intense Pilates classes, they promise self-connection, right? But Gandour suggests that maybe the extreme focus on performance, on pushing through pain, the trembling, maybe it's actually a way to avoid a quieter, deeper connection with the body.
Like running away from yourself, but calling it self-improvement.
Exactly. A flight forward, not necessarily a true return inward.
But these places often talk about building power, discipline, reconstruction even.
They do. And Gandour asks, okay, but what gets sacrificed for that kind of power? He brings up Joseph Pilates. Joseph, he calls him. He says Joseph saw Pilates as an art of consciousness.
An art of consciousness.
Yeah. Meant to reconstruct, reintegrate, realign, not, as Gandour puts it pretty bluntly, to look like an advertisement.
So the focus shifts from internal awareness to just looking strong.
That's his concern. Are we trading that inner knowing for just an outward show? He also worries about pain.
Right. The trembling. He said it could be a signal of life, but also a call for help. How can it be both?
Well, he sees this trend where, in some places, pain becomes a virtue. And he thinks that pulls us away from real self-care. So, yes, sometimes that trembling, that deep muscle work, it's a sign of life, of connection, activation. But other times, it could just be your body screaming, stop, a desperate plea.
A call for help.
Exactly. And it's about learning to tell the difference, really listening, not just pushing through no matter what.
That makes sense. Another big draw for these classes seems to be that feeling of connection, of being seen, the coach shouting your name, maybe getting a 200 trembles superstar sign.
Yeah.
That validation feels good.
Oh, absolutely. It taps into a very human need. But Gandour throws out a challenge there, a really profound one.
Okay.
He asks you, the listener, would you still feel as recognized if you were lying motionless, breathing in your neutral zone?
Wow.
And then he follows it up. Is the body worth less when it's not burning?
Oof. That hits hard. It really makes you think about where that validation comes from. Is it internal, or does it need that external proof, that intense effort?
Precisely. He wants us to look inside for that worth.
There's also, let's be honest, a big economic side to this. These classes can be really expensive. It creates this feeling of, I don't know, being part of an elite club sometimes.
Gandour sees that too. And his take is, again, quite simple but powerful. He says, the breath, it's free. The pelvis, it already knows the way.
I like that.
He's concerned about this linking of body care with luxury. For him, real Pilates could be just a mat in a stable, slow alignment, an ear to the psoas.
The psoas, that deep core muscle.
Right. He emphasizes it doesn't need the blue neon or $400 a month subscriptions. He's not anti-technology, but he warns when price becomes a filter for access to health, it's no longer movement, it's branding.
It's branding. That's a really critical distinction. True well-being shouldn't have a price barrier like that.
It's fundamental, he argues, accessible to everyone.
Which is such a contrast to the images we see everywhere, right?
Yeah.
The media ideal of the thin, dry, long, almost ethereal body. People talk about bodies being snatched.
And Gandour connects that directly to his own experience. He remembers being very dry as a racehorse, his coat shone, muscles rippled, looked amazing, right?
Peak of fitness, you'd think.
Visually, yes, but internally, he says he felt like nothing more than a projectile, a survivor, often with an empty gaze. The strength was superficial.
So appearance versus actual substance.
Exactly, which leads him to ask us all this really searching question. Do I want to see myself differently or be looked at differently?
See myself differently or be looked at differently? That distinction is crucial.
It really gets to the core motivation, doesn't it?
It does. Now, you often hear these intense workouts framed as empowering, especially for women. Like it's about feminine power or taking control, a chosen discipline. How does Gandour respond to that?
He acknowledges the power in saying, I strengthen myself, that sovereignty is real, but then he pushes back gently. He asks, are you truly choosing? Or are you reproducing injunctions under another name? Like, are you choosing strength for yourself, or are you chasing an ideal someone else set?
An ideal maybe disguised as empowerment.
Potentially. He argues that if your sense of power relies on having a certain visible body type measured in inches or calories, he calls that power fragile.
Fragile.
Yeah. A mirage, he says, not a real muscle, because it's built on something external, something that can change, rather than on an internal, inherent strength.
Okay, that's a really important nuance. Throughout all this, you mentioned there's a common theme, a red thread in Gandour's thinking.
Absolutely. It's the breath.
The breath. Seems simple, but he gives it huge importance.
Immense. It's deeply personal for him. He says it was the first thing he sought when he was born, and quite tragically, the first thing that got compressed with restraints during his racing days.
Wow.
And he observes that we humans, we often neglect our breath. We live in apnea, holding our breath without realizing it.
I think we all do that sometimes, under stress.
We do. For Gandour, though, everything starts with the breath. Placement, anchoring, presence. Without conscious breath, he feels Pilates just becomes mechanical.
But with the breath.
With the breath, it becomes poetic. It comes alive.
Poetic. I like that. So, okay, this landscape is complex, lots of noise, lots of focus on performance. What guidance does Gandour give? For instructors, maybe, and also for people just trying to find their way.
He has clear messages for both. For instructors, his advice is maybe surprising. Don't be afraid to teach slowness. Don't be afraid of silence.
Slowness and silence. Not what you usually associate with high-intensity classes.
Not at all. He believes a really good instructor isn't the one who makes you sweat the most. It's the one who makes the movement clearer, truer. The aim should be to reveal, he says, not just to impress.
Reveal, not impress.
And crucially, he reminds them, behind every person paying that subscription, there's often a tired pelvis, a collapsed rib cage, a dispersed mind. Real human stuff. He urges instructors, be gentle with this weight.
That's powerful. Be gentle with the weight people carry, not just the weights they lift.
Exactly.
And what about for the rest of us? Those who might feel, intimidated or excluded, maybe feeling not flexible enough or not thin enough or just not trendy enough for some of these scenes.
His message for them is incredibly empowering. He basically says, look at me. He says, I wasn't white, I wasn't docile, and yet I made my mark.
Love that.
He insists you have a place, you belong, you don't need the expensive leggings or the fancy shakes. What you need is a space, a breath, an attentive guide.
Simple essentials.
Yes. And he gives some very practical advice. If something feels too much, it probably is. Trust your body. And if you feel that pull to return to the essential, you are already on your way.
Just wanting that connection is the first step.
It's the whole journey, in a way.
So it sounds like Gandour really sees authentic Pilates as this art of discernment. He even calls himself an ambassador for that idea.
He does. He sees himself as a witness. He's watched people straighten up, re-inhabit their backs, find their axis through genuine practice.
Right.
He tells this lovely little story about a teacher, Caroline, working with a student who'd kind of lost his way, felt lost in his own body, and she helped him find his center again, just with a single conscious breath.
Single breath.
Yeah. And Gandour says that is Pilates, everything else, it's just trends.
Trends versus the real thing, discernment. It keeps coming back to that Gandour's perspective, coming from where he came from.
Yeah.
It really does offer amazing clarity on, well, our relationship with our bodies and this whole fitness world.
It really does. And his final thought kind of sums it all up beautifully. He says, don't let marketing define your relationship to your body. The body is not an object to monetize. It's a house. Sometimes fragile, sometimes powerful, but always dignified.
Always dignified. That's beautiful.
It is. And so he leaves you, the listener, with this ultimate question. Doesn't matter if you're trembling on a 2,000 euro machine or lying on a worn mat. What matters is, do you feel alive? Are you present? If yes, he says, then you are already winning.
Already winning, not by competing, but by being present.
Exactly. That's Gandour's new race, he says. The one where you gallop without fleeing.